to make, they need to honor the commitments they made to the dead.
Beep, 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 beep. Live from Wellston, Georgia, it's another episode of the Wartown Times.
I've watched that man frustrated through these things, and he'd come home, and I've listened to some of the promises that they made, and all they wanted was the veteran support to get elected, and then they turn around and say, "Who are you?" Mm-hmm. And that's been going on, and I'm real proud. Just a moment or two I had with the mayor they have, is she seemed upright and in strong support, and she seems like to be a lady of her word, and they're hard to find.
Yes, they are.
And I'm excited to see that something that, as they might say, that the pimple is finally coming to a head.
Amen on that. Well, so it's been over 10 years since this endeavor started.
Yeah.
Now, in your experience and in your opinion, is that not ridiculous? And what would be the underlying? Because I'm going to tell you something. Me knowing a lot more of the situation than most.
What it is politicians, God love them, because we got to have them. But if they fix something, then they have to go on to something else. But if they can drag it out, they can spend their whole career trying to fix one thing. Mm-hmm. You just got, it's just kind of, I hate to get into evangelism, sometimes you get the preachers out there, they're going to get that, if you just give me a little bit more money, I can reach more people, and this is the thing. It's kind of like when I ran for election, I ran into citizens that came up and wanted to help me. They said, well, I can get you X number of votes, but, I need about $3,500 to go for gas money to go visit these people, And I could have bought the elections for about $14,000. I had about 3 people that came to me and said, all right, I can get you this. The other one said, I can get you this, but I need, between the 3 of them, they wanted about $14,000 to $15,000 of seed money or gas money to go visit these people, and and if they saw, like I said, politicians, normally their job is to create a problem so they can solve it, rather than solve a problem that already exists. And I feel that the new mayor looks like she wants to bring this thing to a head and, put everybody, let's put this to rest, get it done, at times enough, and it's hard enough when you're trying to remember, and then you're being fought every step of the way with nothing but false promises, you might say, and I know that's what the veterans in this area have dealt with for the last 10 years. With you just get me elected and I'll get it taken care of. Mm-hmm. And then if you get me reelected, I'm gonna really work on it this time. And when you get done, they leave and that bucket is empty. It's kind of like the preacher, he walked out there after the sermon, and a fellow walked up to him and said, "Damn fine sermon." The preacher says, "We don't use that kind of language around here." The guy said, "I was so impressed I put $100 in the plate." And the preacher said, "It takes a hell of a lot of money to run a church."
Right.
So sometimes, that's where you get in the whole thing. I mean, you got to see the humor in it, but half of the guys that started working on this memorial are dead.
Yeah.
Think about that.
Yeah.
I mean, but the politicians are still alive and well, still kicking and screaming and arguing, but the veterans who started this monument will never see it because they're gone.
Right.
And that's pretty embarrassing. And I don't care where you are as an elected official. Mm-hmm. You've got to live with that.
Yeah. That
you made promises to people and they're dead and gone. And you're still hanging on. To make, they need to honor the commitments they made to the dead. And that's who they really owe it to. Because these guys will be around beating the bushes a long time trying to get them to do the right thing. And I think right now they got a mayor that supports them.
And what I think that She is the daughter of veterans, and she's married to a veteran.
Absolutely.
And we finally had to get somebody into that city hall that could empathize with what veterans have to go through. That hasn't just been given the veterans lip service. Oh, we support you, but has to deal with it in their own interpersonal relationships with PTSD and the results of following orders that they not necessarily want to follow, but have to for the country. That we had to have somebody in there who had skin in the game.
Absolutely.
To be able to shoot straight with these gentlemen.
That's
and say it and then start things in motion to get it done.
Get it done.
And I'm of the opinion, because I believe there should always be a way around war if you can.
Well, to me, war is politicians' inability to communicate.
Again, that's Captain William A. Robinson, the longest held prisoner of war in American history. And he was just a pleasure to be in the company of. I mean, this guy was in a POW camp for almost a decade, tapping through walls with spoons, enduring unimaginable torture and trauma that many of us never have to experience. And yet the guy has a sense of humor. And that was one of the things that we did discuss in our full interview, was that you have to have a sense of humor, especially in the ugliest of times. But some of the things I want to accent that he did say was that, you know, these city council members who have been sitting in their seats for as long as this memorial has been proposed, they have to, as he said, they're going to have to figure out a way to make amends to the dead. Amends to the dead, which, good luck with that. And I want to start touching on the last point that he made, which was that war is the inability of politicians to communicate. But before we do, I do want to remind you, please pick up The Longest Rescue. The links are in the Christ box below. It's a wonderful read. I mean, it's a fantastic story. Even the cover, there's a cool story about this picture, which we'll get into on the other the uploads that I do later. And if you don't see the links for the full interview and the full speech that he gave at the Memorial Day celebration in the Christ box below, when this first goes up, it will be there later. So keep an eye out for that. Now, touching on war being politicians' inability to communicate. If you recall, at the final city council meeting, there was a gentleman who stood up. I didn't catch his name in the beginning, but it was Gary Mendel who got up and spoke at the end at Citizens Comment. And so, before we continue, I want to bring that back to your mind and let you hear what he had to say before we press on. So here we go.
This project has been in work for nearly a decade. Now think about that. Nearly a decade this has been in works, and nothing that I know has been done. The vets have been advocating for a wall for a total of 12 years for a wall. 2 administrations, one 4-year administration, one 8-year administration, that's 12 years, nothing was done, has been done. Folks, that war was a terrible war. How many of you gentlemen and ladies was in the armed forces? Raise your hand.
Right, sir.
We have one gentleman there. That war was a terrible war. Those people went through the jungle to fight for this country. They didn't like the war, but they were sent. They did what they were sent to do.
So as Mr. Mendel just said, they didn't like the war, but they were sent to do what they were sent to do by politicians who couldn't communicate or didn't want to communicate, specifically to the American people. So for those of you who don't know why the Vietnam conflict occurred, it stems from something called the Gulf of Tonkin. Now, I'm going to pull up an article to read to you, because a lot of people don't like to read for themselves these days, so we can have a little bit of historical context about what kicked off the entire Vietnam conflict that this is really all about. So let's take a look. All right, so I'm going to be reading from the U.S. Naval Institute, which is usni.org. The name of the article is The Truth About Tonkin. The links for this particular article are in the Christ box below. Where I want to start is about midway through this article at Daylight Attack on a Destroyer. So just to give you a little bit of context, and keep in mind, this is what began the entire conflict in Vietnam. So On 28 July, the Maddox sortied from Taiwan en route to her DeSoto Patrol Station. Specially equipped with communications intercept van and 17 Signet specialists, she was to patrol in international waters off the North Vietnamese coast, from the Demilitarized Zone, or the DMZ, north of the Chinese border. On the night of 30-31 July, the destroyer was on station in the Gulf of Tonkin when a 34A raid was launched against Han Mi Island. From two boats, South Vietnamese commandos fired machine guns and small cannon at the island's radar and military installations. At the same time, two other South Vietnamese commando boats carried out a similar attack against Hong Ngo Island, more than 25 miles to the south. After observing North Vietnamese patrol torpedo boats pursuing the vessels that had attacked Han Mi, the Maddox withdrew from the area. Nevertheless, when later queried by NSA headquarters, the destroyer indicated she had been unaware of the O-Plan raid on the island. That ignorance set the stage for a showdown between North Vietnamese forces and the U.S. Navy eavesdropping platform. By 1st of August, the destroyer had returned to the area and was back on patrol. In the early hours of the next day, Magnus communication technicians intercepted SIGINT reports of North Vietnamese vessels getting underway, possibly intent on attacking the destroyer. On board the ship, Commander Destroyer Division 192, Captain John J. Herrick, ordered the vessel out to sea, hoping to avoid a confrontation. But at 10:45, he reversed orders, turning the Maddox back toward the coast, this time to the north of Han Mi Island. Weather conditions were clear and the seas were calm. At 14:40, the destroyers detected three North Vietnamese patrol boats approaching her position from the west. Aware of North Vietnamese intent from the earlier SIGINT message, Captain Herrick ordered a gun crews to open fire at the fast approaching trio close to within 10,000 yards of the destroyer, and at about 15:05, three 5-inch shots were fired across the bow of the closest boat. In return, the lead vessel launched a torpedo and veered away. A second boat then launched two, quote, fish, end quote, but was hit by gunfire from the destroyer. Re-engaging, the first PT boat launched a second torpedo and opened fire with her 14.5 millimeter guns, but Maddox shell fire heavily damaged the vessel. Overhead, meanwhile, four F-8 Crusaders that the Maddox had called in earlier from the U.S. Ticonderoga, I don't know how to pronounce that, were rapidly approaching. One of the pilots, Navy Commander James Stockdale, commanding officer VF 51, recalled that they passed over the unscathed Maddox at 15:30 minutes after the 22-minute surface engagement had ended. All the enemy boats were heading northwest at about 40 knots, two in front of the third by about a mile. The destroyer was retiring to the south. Stockdale and the other pilots, with orders to, quote, attack and destroy the PT boats, end quote, made multiple firing runs on the enemy vessels. The two lead boats maneuvered evasively, but were nevertheless heavily damaged. The third was left dead in the water and burning. The next day, the Maddox resumed her DeSoto patrol, and to demonstrate American resolve and the right to navigate in international waters, President Lyndon B. Johnson ordered the USS Turner Joy, DD 951, to join the first destroyer on patrol off the North Vietnamese coast. That night, the South Vietnamese staged more O-Plan 34A raids. Three patrol craft attacked a security garrison at Cu Ron, the mouth of the Ron River, and a radar site at Vinh Son, firing 770 rounds of high explosive munitions at the targets. North Vietnamese installations had been attacked four separate times in 5 days. On the morning of 4th August, U.S. intelligence intercepted a report indicating that the Communists intended to conduct offensive maritime operations in the Gulf of Tonkin. In contrast to the clear conditions 2 days earlier, thunderstorms and rain squalls reduced visibility and increased wave heights to 6 feet. In addition to the difficult detection conditions, the Maddox SPS-40 long-range air search radar and the Turner Joy's SPG-53 fire control radar were both inoperative. That night, Herrick had the two ships move out to sea and give themselves maneuver space in case of attack. The Maddox nevertheless reported at 2040 that she was tracking unidentified vessels, although the U.S. destroyers were operating more than 100 miles from the North Vietnamese coastline. The approaching vessels seemed to come at the ships from multiple directions, some from the northeast, others from the southwest. Still, other targets appeared from the east, mimicking attacking profiles of torpedo boats. Targets would disappear, and the new targets would appear from the opposite compass direction. Over the next 3 hours, the two ships repeatedly maneuvered at high speeds to evade perceived enemy boat attacks. The destroyers reported automatic weapons fire, more than 20 torpedo attacks, sighting of torpedo wakes, enemy cockpit lights, and searchlight illumination, and numerous radar and surface contacts. By the time the destroyer broke off her, quote, counterattack, end quote, they had fired 249 5-inch shells, 123 3-inch shells, and 4 or 5 depth charges. Commander Stockdale was again in the action, this time alone. When his wingman's aircraft developed trouble, Stockdale got permission to launch solo from the Ticonderoga, I'm so sorry if I'm butchering that, I'm butchering that, but I apologize. He arrived overhead at 21:35 for more than 90 minutes. He made runs parallel to the ship's course and at low altitude, below 2,000 feet, looking for the enemy vessels. He reported later, quote, "I had the best seat in the house to watch that event, and our destroyers were just shooting at phantom targets. There were no PT boats there. There was nothing there but black water and American firepower," end quote. Captain Herrick also began to have doubts about the attack. As the battle continued, he realized the quote attacks end quote were actually the results of quote overeager sonar operators end quote and poor equipment performance. Their Turner Joy had not detected any torpedoes during the entire encounter, and Herrick determined that the Maddox's operators were probably hearing the ship's propellers reflecting off her rudder during sharp turns. The destroyer's main gun director was never able to lock onto any targets because, as the operator surmised, the radar was detecting the stormy sea's wave tops. By 0127 on 5 August, hours after the quote attacks end quote had occurred, Herrick had queried his crew and reviewed the preceding hour's events. He sent a flash or highest priority message to Honolulu, which was received in Washington at 1327 on 4th August, declaring his doubts, quote, "Review of action makes many reported contacts and torpedoes fired appear doubtful. Freak weather effects on radar and overeager sonar men may have accounted for many reports. No actual visual sightings by Maddox. Suggest complete evaluation before any further action taken." Mean exactly? Well, it means that the entire Vietnam conflict was started and fought over an incident that never happened. So, according to Britannica.com, I wanted to know how many people died in the Vietnam War. And at Britannica.com, it says in 1995, Vietnam released its official estimate of the number of people killed during the Vietnam War. As many as 2 million civilians on both sides and some 1,100,000 North Vietnamese and Viet Cong fighters. The U.S. military has estimated that between 200,000 and 250,000 South Vietnamese soldiers died. The Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C. lists more than 58,300 names of members of the U.S. Armed Forces who were killed or went missing in action. So, all of that loss of human life over an incident that never occurred. Let that sink in. And you could say, who cares? It's ancient history. Doesn't really affect me here. Doesn't affect us now, doesn't it? I mean, if we take a look at the state of our nation right now, it is very clear that we are, as a nation and as a people, very, very traumatized. And, you can, however you want to really look at it, I mean, through either epigenetic memory or the sins of the father going down from one generation to the next. But how many of us come from broken homes? How many of us come from families that can trace trauma back to alcoholism or substance abuse from what they used to call shell shock and didn't have the resources or the understanding to treat PTSD or CPTSD? If you could look at your current situation and see if you were personally affected by anyone who came from the Vietnam conflict, and roll it back and look at the state of the nation prior to the Vietnam conflict. Was it perfect? Absolutely not. Of course not. Was it better morally, ethically, as a nation that was united? I don't know. I mean, it's something to observe. But it's my belief, having come from a family that was directly affected by the events of the Vietnam conflict, that these issues are still permeating today, because when you create generations who are victimized by trauma and fear, they remain in fight or flight, which could possibly explain a lot of the issues that we're facing as a nation today. I mean, but that's just me. You know, I'm no specialist or therapist or licensed anything to be able to make that assessment. It's just, I don't know, common sense. So that's a lot of loss of life for an event that never really happened. So now, does that mean that our soldiers died for nothing or that their service shouldn't be remembered? Absolutely not. I mean, we have to remember these servicemen and women, they take an oath to uphold the Constitution and to follow orders. And unfortunately, when we misplace where authority really lies in government, then you have inept and incompetent or very self-serving politicians who will use the hammer of the military to cause this type of destruction. So, I mean, and is that still a trend that we see happening today? Of course it is. We still see it happening today. Now, one of the things that I really want to point out is that neither the Vietnam conflict nor the Korean conflict or any conflict has truly been a war. This country has not declared war lawfully since World War II. Every other war has been a police action. Essentially, what the Gulf of Tonkin did was it gave politicians a blank check to use our young men and women who sign up for armed forces to use them as cannon fodder for their self-interest without full declarations of war. And so, I mean, to me, it's always been an issue. It's always been a problem that, if you're going to declare war or if you're going to have a war and you're going to use bodies of young men and women as bullet sponges, then at least declare the damn war justly. Send them, fight it, win it, bring them home. But that's just me. Now, what was the issue during World War II that could have set the stage for something like this and any future wars that were fought since Vietnam? Well, Dwight Eisenhower left office after World War II with a dire warning to the American people that still rings true today. And if you're astute, I think you could put the pieces together to see that he was warning us about what would occur in our present day that's affecting us currently. So let's take a listen to President Eisenhower's farewell address and see if we could start connecting the dots here in Wartown. Let's go.
A vital element in keeping the peace is our military establishment. Our arms must be mighty, ready for instant action, so that no potential aggressor may be tempted to risk his own destruction. Our military organization today bears little relation to that known of any of my predecessors in peacetime, or indeed by the fighting men of World War II or Korea. Until the latest of our world conflicts, the United States had no armaments industry. American makers of plowshares could, with time and as required, make swords as well. But we can no longer risk emergency improvisation of national defense. We have been compelled to create a permanent armaments industry of vast proportions. Added to this, 3.5 million men and women are directly engaged in the defense establishment. We annually spend on military security alone more than the net income of all United States corporations. Now, this conjunction of an immense military establishment and a large arms industry is new in the American experience. The total influence, economic, political, even spiritual, is felt in every city, every state house, every office of the federal government. We recognize the imperative need for this development, yet we must not fail to comprehend its grave implications. Our toil, resources, and livelihood are all involved. So is the very structure of our society. In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes. We should take nothing for granted. Only an alert and knowledgeable citizenry can compel the proper meshing of the huge industrial and military machinery of defense with our peaceful methods and goals. so that security and liberty may prosper together.
Only an alert and knowledgeable citizenry. Are we alert? Are we knowledgeable? You know, they say you get the government you deserve. And the microcosms and the macrocosms, they all reflect one another. What's happening on a national level seems to be echoing on a local level and vice versa. And so far, up until now, we have gotten the governments that we deserve because you and I both know we have not been alert and we have not been knowledgeable. I've had this discussion with many people in the community. It is a sad state of affairs when most people can give you the statistics for every Super Bowl game or baseball game that has ever been played for the past 50 years, but they can't recite the Bill of Rights. That's a sad state of affairs. And so when we go back to the entire season of the Wartown Times and this whole issue, we see some villains in this series, clearly. But what is the real villain behind any of this, or any of the woes that we have in our country or community? The real villain is ignorance. Sure, it's ignorance in certain city council members or politicians, but where does ignorance really begin? Because this is a government of the people, for the people, and by the people. It is. Okay? It is. And if you don't like what you see in your local city government or any government, it's nobody's fault but yours for not being alert and knowledgeable. And I know that's a tough one. But when is the last time that you've read this document? When is the last time you've exerted your rights? When is the last time you've held your local politicians to the oath that they took? They took it. They took the oath. But have you held them accountable to that oath? Well, we can, what's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. So, if there's one thing that, there's quite a few things I've tried to point out in this first review this review of the first season of the Wartown Times, and it's that, this document, the Constitution, it clearly says that the jurisdiction of the federal government is the 10-mile square of the District of Columbia, and you don't live there. And I understand that we live in a world where media and information, we're inundated with it. We're drowning in what's the guy say? We're drowning in information, but we're lacking any wisdom whatsoever these days. So, I want to impart to you that, especially today, please do not superimpose what is happening nationwide into the community that we both live in. That's not the way that it works. Travel a little bit, from zip code to zip code, from state to state. We're all different cultures. And when we turn on mass media, I mean, most of our local news outlets, when they're reading, from a teleprompter, they're getting scripts from home office for the most part. They tweak it here and there. And I travel quite a bit. So it's like I respect the different cultures and different zip codes and states and areas of the country as their cultures, but I also appreciate my culture here. And it's important for us to protect that, to understand that what happens in Wellston or the fictional town of Wartown, it doesn't have to be an echo chamber of what these corporate bought and paid for media heads and politicians are trying to peddle down to us. This starts in our local area and it goes upward, not the other way around. And so if there's anything that I've really wanted to express in this past series is yeah, take note of what's going on nationally and with the federal government, but don't try to superimpose it here. This isn't the West Coast. This isn't up north. This is Wellston, Georgia. This is where we're at. So I hope that this has been informative for all of you. I hope that it's been educational, and I hope that it's encouraged you to get involved in local government, specifically now more than ever. I think that Madam Mayor LaRonda Patrick and some members of City Council, they have a hard road ahead of them moving forward for sure. But with this one issue, which is the pushing forth of a Vietnam Veterans State Memorial out of the hands of, well, let's face it, crony capitalist politicians who are just, doing it for the love of money. And again, your Bible doesn't say money is evil. Money is energy. It's the love of money that is the root of all evil. So, but we have seen, at least in this season, that they have the ability and the capacity with the support that they do have to accomplish what they say they're going to accomplish. So, my hope and prayer is that all of you who are paying attention to me in Wartown, the fictional town of Wartown, that you will get up, stand up, have your voices heard peacefully, with wisdom and knowledge. And, this here, this is no light document, I assure you. If you know how to use it, you can rub it like a genie lamp. Please share this, like it, subscribe. Again, this is the final episode of the first season of the Wartown Times. We at Zen in the Car like to go on annual breaks, which is what I am about to do because I have some stories to write, some books to publish, and of course, I have fallen in love with my ability to sort of make music, and so I want to explore that some more. So I hope that this has been a nice little bookend, and I want to thank all of the Vietnam veterans who have persevered over the past decade with this project, and I very much look forward to standing beside you, as well as Madam Mayor and certain members of City Council, whenever there is a ribbon cutting ceremony at this monument to your service and to your sacrifices, as well as those who didn't get to make it home. So, until next time, which we don't know when that will be, please like, share, subscribe. You could still spread our information because we believe that this is evergreen throughout the interwebs to get more and more people active here in Wartown. It is our community, and I care about it. It's where I keep all my stuff. So, once again, my prayers are with all of you, especially with the recent developments in the nation and in our community. And so, until next time, please love one another. And when I say love one another, I don't mean, sit and, I just love everyone. Love isn't a feeling. It's not, love is not a noun. Love is what you do. So I encourage each and every one of you every single day in your community, without any expectation of anything in return, seek ways to show each other in this community that you love one another. Don't say it. Don't wait for the feelings. The action, once it's put into place, will generate the emotion, I assure you. And that is the only way. Believe me, it's the only way. We can get angry at current affairs. We can rail. We can bring up the past ad nauseum. We can try to balance the budget on who owes who, going back forever. And that's never going to work. Never going to work. The wisdom that has come down from on high in every spiritual school or just school of common sense is that there's only one way, and it's together. And the only way that you're going to glue all of us together is through the action of love. And so I do encourage all of you to just love one another. Until next time, stay well. Beep, 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 beep. Live from Wellston, Georgia, it's another episode of the Wartown Times.